Right now you are warm, and you did not even have to think about it. The heat just runs. There is a coat by your door you did not have to kill anything to make. There is food in your kitchen that will still be there next week no matter how cold it gets outside. You have never once gone to sleep genuinely unsure if you would be warm enough to wake up. Now take all of that away. Just your bare skin, a sky the color of nothing, wind that does not stop, and a winter so cold it could kill you in your sleep before you even knew it was happening. No fire, no walls, no stored food, no one coming to help. Just you and a cold that does not care whether you figure it out or not. How long do you think you would last? That used to be normal. Not for one bad season. For hundreds of thousands of years, your ancestors lived through real ice ages. Periods where giant sheets of ice covered whole continents, where the cold could kill a person in a few hours, where every winter was a test you could fail. And failing meant dying. Every single one of them won that fight. You are the proof of that. Every ancestor in your line lived long enough to pass life forward to you, which means not one of them lost to winter. Not permanently anyway. So how did they do it? How does a soft, hairless animal that evolved in the heat of Africa survive the coldest weather this planet has ever thrown at a human being? That is what this video is about, because it is one of the most extraordinary survival stories we have, and almost nobody knows how close we came to not making it at all. Let's be honest about what they were actually up against, because the word winter makes it sound like a cold afternoon and a campfire. It was nothing like that. The last glacial maximum, the absolute worst of the last ice age, hit hardest between roughly 26,000 and 19,000 years ago. Paleoclimatologist Peter Clark and his colleagues, using deep ocean sediment cores and ice cores from Greenland and Antarctica, have reconstructed a picture of this period that is difficult to fully absorb. Ice sheets sat on top of Europe, Asia, and North America. The land was flat, frozen, and open. Nothing to stop the wind. Trees were scarce. Temperatures in parts of Europe regularly dropped to 30 or 40 degrees below 0 Celsius. The growing season lasted weeks, not months. Food vanished for half the year at a time, and humans just are not built for that. We come from warm places. Our bodies still act like it. We have no thick fur. We have no blubber layer like a seal. We cannot slow our heartbeat and sleep through the cold like a bear. A person stripped of their clothes in real cold has hours before their core temperature drops past the point of return. The body shuts down, the heart slows, the thinking stops, and that is the end. The animals around them were made for this. Woolly mammoths had thick fur and a fat layer several inches deep. Cave bears could hibernate for months. Reindeer could simply walk south to somewhere warmer. Humans had none of those options. On paper, we should have been one of the first things to disappear when the temperatures dropped. Wrong body, wrong place, worst possible time. But we had something no other animal had. A brain that could plan further ahead than the next meal, and hands that could build the things our bodies were missing. That turned out to be enough. Just barely. There was no single trick that saved us. It was a whole system of them, each one solving a problem that would have killed them if they hadn't figured it out in time. Here's how they actually pulled it off. It started with fire, and not the small rough fires you might picture. At Ice Age campsites excavated in Ukraine, archaeologists expected to find modest hearths. Instead, they found carefully engineered fireplaces, one of which had burned at over 600 degrees Celsius, which is hotter than 1,100 degrees Fahrenheit. That is not a survival fire. That is a furnace. When wood became scarce on the open frozen plains, they burned fat and bone instead. They had learned that bone marrow rendered down burns long and hot. Fire gave them heat, cooked their food, hardened their tools, and extended the day by hours when the winter sun barely cleared the horizon before setting again. But fire has a fatal limitation. You cannot take it everywhere. So they did something no other animal has ever done. They took the warmth off other animals and put it on their own bodies. At first it was simple. Animal skins thrown across the shoulders. But here is a detail that should stop you. Archaeologists have found cut marks on bear paw bones from northern Europe dating back at least 300,000 years. Cut marks in exactly the place where you would slice to pull a whole skin cleanly off a paw. That means humans were systematically harvesting bear hides for clothing hundreds of thousands of years before the last ice age even began. A loose skin, though, leaks heat through every gap. And for a real ice age, that is not enough. The solution arrived around 30,000 years ago. and it is so small it seems almost absurd in proportion to its importance. The sewing needle. A thin sliver of bone or ivory with a tiny hole drilled through one end. One researcher called it possibly the most significant invention in human history, and when you think about what it enabled, that argument holds up. The needle meant fitted clothing, sealed seams, layers, sleeves that closed at the wrist, hoods that closed around the face. The difference between a skin thrown over your shoulders and a coat that actually fits your body is the difference between surviving the night and not. Early modern humans almost certainly had more sophisticated fitted clothing than the Neanderthals who shared Europe with them. And that difference in thermal protection may have contributed to which population made it through the worst centuries of the Ice Age. They did not stop at fur. Deer hide, scraped and worked until soft, made wind-resistant mittens and waterproof boots. Before heading out into the open, hunters would rub rendered animal fat, tallow, over their exposed faces and necks. It sealed the skin against wind and held in heat the way a thin membrane holds in moisture. Simple, effective, and in use for tens of thousands of years before anyone thought to write it down. On open snow fields, there was another danger that killed people then, and still kills people now. Snow blindness. The glare off unbroken white can destroy your vision within hours. The solution your ancestors developed was a carved piece of bone or antler with two thin slits cut into it, tied across the eyes. The slits reduced the field of light entering without blocking the view. The first sunglasses, made of bone, used by people who had never heard the word optics. Now let's talk about where they slept. Everyone imagines Ice Age humans in deep caves. The truth is, both stranger and more impressive. At a site called Medjugorje in Ukraine, a region with no caves and almost no usable wood, archaeologists uncovered the remains of round houses built almost entirely from mammoth bones and tusks. Skulls and large femur bones formed the base. Rib bones and curved tusks created the frame. Some structures used hundreds of individual bones. The frames were then packed with hides, moss, and compacted earth, creating walls with genuine insulating value. The largest of these structures dates to approximately 18,000 years ago, right at the coldest point of the last glacial maximum, and the site shows signs of repeated occupation over hundreds of years. People came back to the same house, winter after winter, across generations. They also engineered the interior. Many cold climate shelters from this period show what archaeologists call a cold trap entrance, a doorway dug lower than the sleeping area inside. Cold air is denser than warm air and sinks. By positioning the entrance lower than the living floor, cold air that entered would pool in the entrance pit and stay there, while the warmer air generated by body heat and fire rose to where the family slept. This is basic thermodynamics. They worked it out tens of thousands of years before anyone wrote an equation for it. They use snow the same way. Snow is an extraordinary insulator. Its structure traps air, and trapped air holds heat. A shelter banked with packed snow on the outside can maintain an interior temperature near freezing even when the air outside drops to -30. Long before the Inuit refined the igloo into its most efficient form, people across Eurasia already understood that inside a snowbank was dramatically warmer than outside one. But warmth tonight does not solve the problem of food in February. Winter's slower killer is starvation. For months, there was almost nothing to gather and very little to hunt, so they became extraordinarily methodical about food storage. When a large kill was made, a mammoth, a whole herd of horses driven off a cliff, they did not just eat, they preserved. The cold itself did part of the work, freezing meat that could be cached for later. They smoked meat and dried it into strips. They rendered fat into a dense, calorie-rich paste. At several Ice Age sites, archaeologists have found evidence of underground storage pits, dug into the permafrost, which kept everything cold and stable through the warm months as well as the cold ones. There is even evidence from some sites suggesting that heavy mammoth bones were submerged in cold ponds to keep the attached meat fresh longer, a natural refrigeration system requiring no technology at all beyond the understanding that cold water preserves. At a site near a tall limestone formation in eastern France, evidence shows Ice Age hunters used coordinated fire lines and human formations to drive entire herds of wild horses and reindeer into natural funnel traps, not once, but repeatedly over tens of thousands of years. The same location, the same technique, generation after generation. Kill big in autumn, Store everything. Ration through winter. That plan is most of the reason they lived. Here is something that is easy to miss when we tell this story. These people were not surprised by winter. Their entire annual cycle was organized around it. Every decision about where to camp, when to move, how much to hunt, how much to store, all of it was structured around the coming cold. We are the ones who treat winter like an inconvenience. We are the ones who assume the power will come back on. They never assumed anything would come back on. They also used each other. More people lived under one roof than we would ever tolerate in far less space. And that was not poverty. It was engineering. Body heat is a real and significant source of warmth when enough bodies share a small enclosed space. The person with a room to themselves was not the lucky one. They were cold and exposed. It was the isolated, especially the old, who died first in a hard cold snap because there was nobody beside them to share warmth. The group was the technology. For hundreds of thousands of years, making it to spring was never certain. Every winter was a test. Every generation that passed was proof that the ones before them had figured out something the cold had not anticipated. And here is what I keep coming back to. In a few thousand years, barely a breath on this timeline, we went from stacking mammoth bones into a house and sewing fur with a bone needle to tapping a button for heat and ordering food to the door. The deadliest thing your ancestors ever faced is now something we complain about on the walk to a warm car. We beat winter so completely that most people forgot it was ever a war. But your body remembers. The way you pull your arms in against the cold. The way you move toward other people in a dark room. The instinct to check the food supply before a storm. Those reflexes are older than cities, older than writing, older than the wheel. They were built into you by people who could not afford to forget them. Right now, you are warm. And somewhere underneath that warmth, the part of you that earned it, generation by generation, winter by winter, is still paying attention.